the regular meeting of the Truckee Sanitation Agency of March 15th. To order, start with roll call.
Yeah. Vice President Trazen.
Here.
Director Smelser.
Here.
Director Wilson.
Here.
Director Cox.
Yes.
And let the record reflect that President Wilkins is absent.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. We'll now do the Pledge of Allegiance. So, ready, begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Next item is public comment. Is anybody here to speak on an item not on the agenda? Has there been any electronic or written public comments that we should be aware of?
None have been received.
Okay. So with that, we will move on to item 3, which is Professional Achievements Awards and Anniversaries.
Since we have Vicki helping out with the AV, Michael is going to do the acknowledgement.
Good morning, Board of Directors, Vice President Trason. This month, we'd like to acknowledge the Staff Professional Achievement Awards and Anniversaries. One that we have is the Operations Department is Joel Overly. He has received his Wastewater Treatment Operator 2 Technologist, and he has been promoted to an Operator 2. I'd like to congratulate him on that achievement today. Any questions? That was the only achievement.
Great. Joel, congratulations. Good job.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for growing here and working here. And if there's nothing else, we will move on. You guys can probably get back to work.
Appreciate it.
Thank you. Moving on to item 4, the consent agenda. Is there anybody wishing to take any of the items on the consent agenda off the regular agenda? No?
No.
So at this point, I will entertain a
Also moved.
motion. Thank you.
Second.
So motion by Smelser, second by Wilson. Any public comment on the consent items? Hearing none. Do we need to do
Do a roll call.
the roll call? Okay, so then we'll do a roll call for approval of the consent agenda.
Vice President Trason.
Yes.
Director Smelser.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
And Director Cox.
Yes.
Super. All right, moving on to item 5, the regular agenda. The first item on there is the approval of the minutes for the regular board meeting of February 15th, 2023.
I so moved.
Moved by Director Wilson.
Second.
Second. Any discussion on the agenda or the minutes? Any public comment? Hearing none, we'll take a roll call.
Vice President Trason.
Yes.
Director Smelser.
Yes.
Director Wilson.
Yes.
And Director Cox.
Yes.
So moved. And item 2 of the regular agenda is consideration of possible action on the acceptance of the sewer rate study by HDR Engineering and setting of a public hearing in accordance with Proposition 218 for a change in the sewer rates for the years 2024 through 2028. That public hearing would be set for May 17th, 2023.
Good morning, directors, everybody. We are here today. Sean is here today from HDR to present the rate study and the suggestion of accepting the proposed rates and then also accepting of the Prop 218 letter. One thing to note on the Prop 218 letter, there is on the very top, March XX 2023. that will be the date that if everything is accepted today and we move forward to the public hearing, that will be the date that InfoSend puts on the mailer when it gets mailed out. They need about a week to process everything. So with that, I will try.
Thank you, Crystal. Good morning, board. I appreciate the opportunity. So I have a presentation here to summarize our final recommendations. Many of these slides, if not all of them, you have seen. So I will kind of go through the basic slides just as a reminder, and then we'll key in on a couple of the specifics that we want to touch on that are really driving the overall final study recommendations. So on the next slide, we have our overview. Talk about our purpose of the presentation, overview of the study, the results and recommendations, and then our questions and discussions as we go through this. I'm sorry, I can't see that, so I'm going to look here. And they're new glasses, so. Ultimately, as we go through, we want to talk about the rate transition plan, the overall cost of service results on that EDU basis, and the final proposed rates. As Crystal said, moving forward, gain any feedback and input on the study, but looking for the board to accept the study. We have this presentation, the Proposition 218 customer notification, and there's a draft report also that was included. We have received some edits and comments on that draft report, so we'll be turning that into a draft final that will be posted as part of this process as well and available for the public to view as we go forward. And then next steps, if the board moves forward, is to hold that public hearing. And then if there's no majority protest, then the board may adopt those rates for fiscal years 2024 through 2028. So that's kind of our final presentation here before we move into that public hearing. So kicking into the overview of the rate study, again, remember we're looking at providing and developing an analysis to adequately support the operation, maintenance, and capital infrastructure that you have here at the agency and develop that rate transition plan to meet that. We also need to develop rates that are cost-based and proportional, so we meet the intent and requirements of Proposition 218. And as we do that, we want to make sure we meet those financial metrics. So maintaining adequate debt service coverage ratio. As we've talked about, we have existing debt on the books that retires here in a couple of years, but we are looking at some longer-term debt financing, so we want to make sure we meet that financial metric. As well as adequately funding capital improvement projects. That's what that capital funding analysis is that we'll talk about here in a few. And then targeting those reserve balances. And so we talked about that a lot last time I was here, just looking at that balance, where we're going, and then as you all mentioned, staff is also looking at those targets. Are those the appropriate targets that should be used going forward as you go through this? The way we do this is through generally accepted principles based on your specific criteria. So on the next slide, we have that three-step process that you're all very familiar with now. It's our revenue requirement, or our financial plan, our cost of service, where we come back to that cost per equivalent dwelling unit, or EDU, and then ultimately designing those proposed rates in that third step. So we walk through these sequentially. So we have our cost basis and the revenue requirement, our proportionality, and our cost of service, and then our rates reflect the results of those. So as we go through this, a couple of the key study issues that we've talked about is adequately funding annual O&M expenses, and the last rate change being back in fiscal year 2011. As we've all seen, costs have continued to increase. As we go through this, the reserve balances have been split between restricted and unrestricted. So we have our Fund 2 for our future expansion. That's pulled out of this. That's a separate discussion on the connection fee side. And then as we talked about, right now we're not meeting those target minimum balances. We're getting there over time, but we're not hitting them immediately, and definitely not in this first 5-year window. So as we go through this, we want to make sure we're adequately funding that capital, balancing those rate impacts with meeting those reserve requirements, as well as our overall capital needs and funding approach as we go through this. So on slide 8, we have this slide we talked about in the past, and looking from 2011, fiscal year 2011 forward, what that CPI adjustment would have been to those rates starting in 2011. You can see as you go across, the line is our current rate at $306. And as you go across with the CPI, we would end somewhere around $400 if we would have just implemented the CPI, annual CPI adjustment. So it gives us a good frame of reference of where the rates would have been had we implemented adjustments, and also gives us a reference for when we start looking at the adjustment in year 1 and 2 in our transition plan of how that compares as part of that process. So jumping into the study results, remember the revenue requirement we're looking at over a long-term period. We actually built the model for a 30-year period. We really focused in on 10 years, and for rates, we focused in even further on the 5-year window. So that's really where we put all of our effort is looking at, or most of our effort is looking at that first 5 years and then what those impacts were of capital in those out years to make sure that we're coming back and meeting or moving towards those financial metrics, maintaining those as we're looking at our overall financing needs as we go forward for the capital improvement programs. So starting out with that, I think this slide is a really good example of the process of the revenue requirement. There's 2 boxes here. The upper box is really more of our O&M expenses and our annual rate-funded capital. The bottom box is how we think about the capital. So I'm going to focus here a moment on the bottom box. We take the capital in each year, and we take a look at how are we going to pay for this. Do we have enough in reserves to pay for these projects? Do we need to borrow for those projects? Are there other outside funding sources? Maybe there's grants, et cetera, that you could build into this. And again, on those, we don't include those unless you have that letter in your hands that says you're going to get this information so that we set rates at an appropriate level. Ultimately, as part of this, we want to identify a portion of annual rate revenues that are going to fund capital renewal and replacement needs. And the reason we do that is so that our rates reflect a level that is we can reinvest in the system on an annual basis. So that line on the right that comes back up to the top box, that's our rate-funded capital component. So each year we're identifying an amount of annual rate revenues that is going to directly, essentially directly, it's not going to be a transfer or anything like that, but it's going to pay for our capital improvements. On the left-hand side, we also have that line going up where when we issue debt to pay for capital projects, it has to come back and be funded through our annual rate levels. That's really what supports it. Yes?
The $55 million on that right side, is that over what time frame?
That's over the 10 years.
Okay.
Thank you. Good clarification there. And same, the $28 million is what we're funding as well over the next 5 years. So that's the debt component. So that it works out to be approximately $5 million a year as we get out. We ramp up to that in the short term, but that's that $5 million a year is approximately out now years. So that primary component there is looking at how we balance our capital funding, right? The impacts of financing that or additional rate revenues to that capital plan, and then what impacts that has coming back up to our overall rate revenue levels that we need to accomplish, because that top box includes our annual O&M expenses, existing and future debt, plus any rate-funded capital. And that's the key here when we look at the bottom box is if we don't have any other sources to fund the projects, we're starting to get limited in how we're going to do those projects. And rates are one way, or we start adjusting that capital plan. And that's part of what staff did as part of this plan, is going through those projects, prioritizing those needs, looking at what the impacts were as we went through this. We went through a handful of different iterations on that capital plan, trying to look at what the timing would be, and again, with some of the current economic impacts, what the cost of those projects are going to be as we move over the next couple of year period. So on the next slide, here's our Fund 6, and again, just that reminder, this is just our Fund 6, it's our renewal replacement projects. We have a total of $82 million over the next essentially 10-year period. And in our first couple of years, we've included an increased inflation number. So we've got a 10% plus our annual 3.8%. Now that 3.8% is our capital inflation number. So it's just used to take the capital plan that was in today's dollars and bring it up to inflated numbers in the out years at 3.8%. And that was based on looking back at the Engineering News Record, CCI. What's that average increase that we've been seeing in that over time? You know, right now, if you look at it, it's much higher than 3.8%, so that's why we have those 10s in those first couple of years, and then that carries out at 3.8 in the out years. But a couple of the key projects here, sorry if you can go back, thanks. You'll see them highlighted here. The top one's the TRI, so that has a pretty big impact on things, as well as the second one down, the plant-wide electrical improvements. And then the third one, the middle one there, the digestion improvements, that's the big one. That's a key driver in the timing of our capital plan. And really the cash flow component of how we're trying to meet that. So that drives a portion of that debt that we need to issue because we don't have sufficient reserves or rate levels to fund that entire project. And that's not uncommon. So when we look at projects of this magnitude, because we're looking at around 22, 23 million, if I'm doing my math right real quick here, on those 3 years, you know, that's not something that many agencies can just cash fund. So those one-off projects are really ones that we look at to see, okay, what's the timing of this? How do we fund that? And generally debt is the answer. Some sort of debt is the answer to that.
Quick question.
Yeah.
Just these capital cost numbers, do they include construction? I'm just trying to remember back to the estimates that Corona did in the master plan, as well as the kind of pre-design, design, construction management. It's the full capital cost. It's not just the construction cost.
Engineering, admin, legal, construction.
Okay. Thank you.
Oh, good question. We've had that happen before. So
Don't want to leave those out.
no, those are important ones. So as we go forward, there's the roof replacement component. Again, you can see the timing of that spread out. But again, looking at each of those years, once we get over kind of that hump of the digestion project, as we get out into those out years, that's where we're running at about that $5 million a year of annual investment in the system. And so that's where we came back and talked about, okay, what's that rate funded level that we should target? That's one of the figures I look at. I look at annual depreciation expense, which is going to be the floor. That's the lowest because that reflects assets that were put in the ground a long time ago, versus what you're actually seeing as your renewal and replacement needs. And that $5 million is what you're looking at based on the master plan and staff's adjustments to this to fund annually through rates. So that's key driver. So to summarize our overall key assumptions on the next slide, we started with our fiscal year 23 budget. We projected that out through 2032 for the 10-year. We also have the out 20 years that we have built in the model. In this case, the average annual inflationary level is 3.6%. Now that's a mix of different inflation factors. So we have a labor inflation factor, we have a benefits inflation factor, we have a materials and supply inflation factor. But if you look at the O&M expenses, each year that change averages at 3.6. So again, different than the capital, but that's a little bit of a different calculation. You know, our construction cost index versus our consumer price index is one way to think about that difference as part of it. We do have our existing long-term debt, which is fully funded and retired in fiscal year 27. And then we just talked about our capital funding analysis, how we went through those projects that were on the screen a moment ago, and then looking at those overall funding sources that we have as we go through that. And really basing that on the master plan, right? Looking at those projects, what's critical right now for this facility, and how do you move forward with those projects, and looking at the aging infrastructure and how we debt finance that. And a lot of that is the river crossings, the phosphorus removal, the digestion improvements, and roof replacements. Those projects we had highlighted before are key drivers in that overall capital funding plan. So when we look at this graphically on the next slide, then what we're looking at is how do we pay for that total, that bottom line on a couple slides ago, how do we pay for that? So looking at this slide, it's a mix of different components in the short term when we have that peak in capital improvement. So in the initial years, then we're funding that with our Fund 6. That's the orange color there in that first year, and then the second bar in the second year and the third year. And then we start transitioning in that blue bar, which is our rate-funded capital. That's trying to get our rates to a sufficient level to reinvest in the system. So that ratchets up. You're there over a couple of years till we get to that roughly $5 million level. Then we do have some other reserves in that black bar in the middle of the third year, and then the green, or the top bars in those 3 years, that's the debt issuance. And so that's really where we're looking at funding the digestion project, along with some other bits and pieces of other projects, just to get the cash flow and timing down as we go through this.
And the sum of those three green bars is the
$8 million.
$28 million.
Yep. And so that's where I said the $55 million you asked about, that's over the 10-year, but that debt is really just in those 3 fiscal years there.
And the nature of the, kind of leaning back towards perhaps Jay, the nature of those capital projects are such that there's no way to kind of bleed those out over a longer period of time. And you're doing a digestion project, and we're looking at $13 million in 1 year. You got to get all that work done really in that year. You can't build half or a quarter of the digester. You got to do the whole thing and the heating and all that. And so we're really kind of the nature of the capital improvements kind of require large expenditures in a relatively short period of time.
Yeah, and furthermore, if you were to try to drag that out or something, then it gets more expensive. Just the construction lasting longer leads to higher costs.
And that's where we worked. Staff had given, a Senate plan to me. We updated. They looked at it and we went, okay, what can we adjust? They went back, looked at that, revised that timing-wise, cost-wise, et cetera, as we went through. Because that is a key driver, and that's a key driver for almost all agencies. We have this peak of, infrastructure that needs to be replaced, or in some cases it's expansion. How do you fund that? Because there's a need for it, and we have to put together that financing plan to meet those needs. So this is really a grouping of funding approaches as part of this. And so that's something that, as you all move forward, looking at what that debt will actually look like at that point in time, that'll have that impact on the overall study. But we're really, looking at the assumptions here, that financing plan for capital carry us into the next slide when we look at the total revenue requirement. So in this case, the wider bars are our total revenue requirement. So they're a sum of our O&M expenses, our rate-funded capital, that blue line from the prior slide, our existing and future debt as part of that, and then any reserve funding, which is the orange cap on each of those outer bars as we get out of ways. The skinnier bars, those are our current revenue levels. So the first part of it, the lighter blue color in there, that's our annual rate or service charge revenue. So that's what we collect from customers. The green bar on the top is our other miscellaneous revenues. Almost all of that is the property tax revenues. So there's some other miscellaneous revenues that come in the door as well, but they're minuscule compared to the property tax revenue. So what you can see here is in year 1, fiscal year 23, we're close, but our total revenues are slightly below our expenses or our total revenue requirement. That consists of really just our O&M expenses, a little bit of rate-funded capital, and the existing debt that we have. As we go out, you'll see the O&M increases. That's the black bar on the bottom. That goes just above the thinner bar. That's that 3.6% year inflation on our O&M on average. Then the blue bar steps in, which is our rate-funded capital from the capital funding analysis. That's that line that went up on the right-hand side of our graphic. And then we have our green, which is our existing plus future debt. Now in fiscal year 27, that actually shrinks a little bit. So you'll see in 27 years, since you all can see this, sorry Dale, in 27 our green bar gets us up to about 30 million. In 28, our debt actually comes down a little bit. So in that year we get that orange cap on there where we're able to put some money back into reserves to start getting our trend line going back the other way as part of that. So that's that transition to our total debt assumption as we go out. So you can see over time, if rates were not adjusted and left at current rate levels, so that's our rate, our $306 per BTU today, plus our average miscellaneous revenue, which is primarily property tax revenues, we don't cover O&M, and we definitely don't cover our rate-funded capital or our existing and future debt service. So in summary on the next slide, then we're looking at rate adjustments being necessary to meet our O&M and capital needs. As we talked about, we have that $28 million in debt service. We've assumed a 20-year period at 4.5%. So as Crystal and other staff work through that process, that may change a little bit, just depending on the market, the type of debt that you may have. There's a lot of options out there with some of the low interest loans. It just depends on how you all qualify and how that works as part of that process. We're targeting, targeting reserves at the policy levels. As we'll see here in a moment, we're not quite there. But we are reinvesting in the system at an adequate level. And I think that's an important component that has come up with almost every agency I'm working with right now, not just here in the basin, but in other areas of the country, is we're getting to a point where our infrastructure is getting old and it's being worn out. And so we're having to now reinvest at a higher level than we have historically because of that. So that's an important part, but we are getting that to an adequate level based on the information in our plans today. As we talked about, we developed multiple different alternatives. How do we get to where we need to be? And we reviewed 3 of those at that last meeting. And ultimately, the focus here is on the 5-year plan where we're transitioning that in over the next 5-year period. So on the next slide, we have that approach that we talked about. So you can see here we have the annual change in the rate on the top line. The second line is our annual customer bill, the 1 EDU, so that's at $306 today. That would increase to $398, which, as I referenced earlier, if you looked at the CPI adjustments from fiscal year 2011 until today, we'd be right around that $398 with those CPI adjustments. Then you can see annually how that changes, and then that percentage change in the bill. That was that transition plan that we looked at as we went through that. And then below that, I have the monthly customer bill. So just to see we're up to $25.50 today, increasing to $33.17, or a change of $7.67 and onward as we go out as part of that. We also have the debt service coverage ratio. This is an important one as you all move forward. Getting up to that 1.5, 1.6 level through 2027, and then we do have a nice bump in 2028 as we get out there as that existing debt comes off. Revenues are up at a significant level from that point in time as well. So we then can start transitioning and putting funds back into the reserves to start targeting those minimum levels, which on the next slide, we have our Fund 6 and our Fund 7 and 10. So you can see here on Fund 6, we're not getting there, but we do start building to that in 2027 and out, as we're starting to be able to put funds back into that to get up to target levels, as well as Fund 7 and 10. We draw that down pretty good to fund capital, and then that starts ramping back up again also after fiscal year 2027. So have that plan to what that looks like as we go out, and then as you all evaluate what those target minimums may need to be as you move forward, then these charts can be adjusted as well as part of that. And Crystal and I have talked about how that works in the model. So she can take this, update that dashed line on both of those, and the chart will update based on that information. So once we have the revenue requirement, that transition plan, then we can go to the next slide on our cost of service. And again, this is to meet the proportionality requirement of Proposition 218. So looking at that on a cost per EDU or equivalent dwelling unit, and coming back to our proportional and cost-based rates as part of that. So that really looks at your rate schedule, so how we charge a single-family 1 EDU, how our non-residential are per seat or per fixture unit, looking at those relationships or ratios between that. And so on the next slide, we have it summarized a little bit easier, where we're looking at that EDU basis. We reviewed that. Ultimately, they're based on flow and strength, so that per EDU charge is a reflection of that for each seat or fixture unit. Those are standard metrics that are out there, historically based on the EPA, has some schedules out there as part of that that are really the basis for this type of approach. We're not recommending any changes to that approach, and so we calculated that EDU based on the overall cost that we developed in that revenue requirement to come back for that charge. So now that we know that, we can go to rate design. As we talked about, we've maintained that current rate structure. We have made minor revisions to that rate schedule table to just reflect what we see out there today, as well as to tie that to what we've done in the connection fee in the past, so that we have the same categories and the same relationship. So an EDU is an EDU, which is the way we should have it, and making sure that those ratios are the same as part of that. As we went through this, something we talked about at the last meeting was eliminating the non-tax area schedule. So there, for those customers that don't provide the agency with property tax, they have a slightly higher rate. Recommending that we eliminate that, add some administrative ease to the process, as well as customer understanding where all customers pay the same rate now, regardless of where they're located as part of that. So on the next slide, this would be the proposed rate schedule. So this is kind of that one-page summary. Down towards the bottom, you'll see the 1, 2, 3, 4 from the bottom here. We have our residential unit, 306 going to 398. And then you have each of the different categories here as part of that. Number of fixture units, seats, number of washing machines for a laundromat, et cetera, as part of that as you go forward. And then the rate schedule for the 5-year window. So with that, how do you compare to others? As we talked about, these are never an apples to apples comparison. You know, some folks have different treatment processes, some folks have a different customer base. You know, looking at this, you know, just some of the different agencies, you're kind of right in the mix there. One I talked about before was Big Bear Area Regional Wastewater Agency. They're kind of the low one here. They have just recently adopted a 5-year rate transition plan, which is going to put them up above our proposed. They're going to be looking right around $500-600 now with the projects they're implementing at their regional treatment plant. So it's a hard one here on the regional systems as well because of the timing of the improvements. Again, you know, how old was their plant? Did they just do a major infrastructure replacement, or is that coming, and how that was financed? But again, kind of right in line. And then on the next slide is our monthly comparison. So again, obviously since it's just the total divided by 12, the same ratios, but it gives you an idea of what that monthly bill would be going forward. So to wrap things up here, as I mentioned, looking for final feedback or comments, looking for acceptance of the overall study, and then if the board directs staff that the Proposition 218 customer notice would be sent out to all customers based on the public hearing date of May 17th, and then at that point in time, you would hold that public hearing. If there was not a majority protest, so 50% plus one of your customers did not protest the rate, then the board has the opportunity to adopt and implement those rates. If there is a majority protest, then you cannot move forward, and you have to go back to the drawing board and go through the process again as part of that. So with that, I appreciate it. And are there any questions that myself or staff can answer for you all?
Thank you, Sean and Crystal and your staff. I'm sure the whole TTSA staff and going through this process and getting us to this point. I'll open it up to any questions or comments from other board members, including Dale.
Yeah, I got a comment. I want to thank Sean for putting together this presentation. You know, this has been a real eye-opener for me, only because what I have to do is I have to sit back and think about our agency not raising rates since 2007, and you've mentioned a few times that in a normal circumstance, an annual rate increase of 2 to 3% usually keeps an agency or an operation such as ours on an even keel. And, you know, just because we've got significant or substantial capital reserves does not mean, as I can it does not mean that we are in a financially stable situation. And you're absolutely right. Our plant is 50 years old. We're going to be addressing some significant changes. I'm interested in seeing how this boiler and boiler transition project that we've got coming up is going to impact our reserves. But I just wish that we could have had this presentation maybe 2 or 3 years ago, so that we could have eased the pain to our constituents moving forward. But thank you, Sean, for knocking it out of the park as always, and I really appreciate what you've done for us.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Thanks, Dale. Director?
I'd heard great things from the people at NTPUD, and when I got here, great things about Sean and HDR. I'm kind of thinking, well, no organization or no one person could be that good. You absolutely, to quote Dale, you knocked it out of the park. And I'd be remiss without acknowledging Crystal, you and your staff, the entire staff, for the work that you did. My business background, this is equal to or better than pretty much anything I'd ever worked on before. So hats off to you, and I truly appreciate it. Being new, it was like drinking from the fire hose, but the education is invaluable going forward. So thank you both, you teams, very much.
David, any comments?
No, I'm good.
Okay. I had a couple. I'm prepared to accept the report and move forward. I think it really does put us on a path to being able to continue to achieve our critical mission that we have here. Super important that we're taking care of it now. That said, I also just I know that the financial plan that put this together makes assumptions about capital costs and operating costs and escalating factors, and I just want to remind staff that it's this is all being funded with the public's money, and that we need to always continue to look for opportunities to use that in the most wise way possible. This doesn't give us kind of a carte blanche to escalate at the rates they do. We always want to be thoughtful in our capital projects and in our operating costs. Don't want to compromise our ability to achieve our mission, but need to be prudent with the public's funds as well. I think that we've made some good assumptions, conservative, I think a little bit, which is important to do. But as we go forward, we got to continue to be prudent users of this money, and if we don't have to raise rates to their maximum rate, or after 5 years we're in a better spot than we think, that's a good position to be in. And when we go back potentially for future rates as well. But again, great. I did have a couple other questions. One was, there's no public here. Here we're about to embark on this significant rate increase, and I know that it's been agendized. Public's not really paying attention. I know the next thing we're going to talk about is the 218 mailer. They're all going to become aware of this. There's a public hearing that we're setting for May. Curious if April. I guess I would ask that if we start to hear a lot of feedback, whether it makes sense to consider agendizing this topic again for April if we start to get feedback from the public, so that we can educate them. I think it's important for us to be as transparent as possible. I don't know what we're going to hear. I really don't know whether this is going to move the needle. Percentage-wise, it's a significant increase, but you look at those $7 a month. What is that? That's not very many cents to handle all your wastewater treatment needs. I don't know whether people are going to, even bat an eye at this, but I think we should be prepared to, if there's public interest, to give them this presentation there's a lot in it that we can't all squeeze into the 218 notice, and so just let's keep our eyes open for that. And, possible, and I assume that Sean be coming back in May, so that if we do have at the public hearing, people are able to hear the full picture as well. Whether they protest or not, we want them to at least understand it. And again, I think we've done a good job in the notice, but there's obviously a lot to it. So at this point, Richard, I just want to make sure, or do we have an opportunity to make a motion on acceptance of the HDR report, or do we wait to the ending and make a motion both on the HDR report and on the subsequent items on the agenda with respect to the 218 hearing?
I'm going to ask Andrew, with the way we agendized it, can we proceed in that fashion, accepting the report and then have a discussion about the flyer in the 218 and then get direction to move forward on that?
Yeah, it is appropriate to accept the report at this time and then move on incrementally to the next step. That would be perfectly fine. Yes.
Okay. So
Thank you, Andrew.
So any other director's comments?
Okay, I've got just one, not so much a comment, but a request. Richard, I don't know if it's you or Rochelle that could help me out with this, but what I would like is slide number 17 and slide number 23 included in my TTSA report to Olympic Valley Board. Our board members are pretty interested in, very interested in the direction we're headed here. And these two slides answer a lot of the questions that I'm anticipating at our next board meeting. So if you could include these two slides in my report package to Olympic Valley Board, I'd really appreciate it.
Yes, we'll take care of that.
No problem.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dale. Again, I don't see any public here, but I'm just curious. I don't know that this is a hybrid, so there's probably nobody listening in from the public. But so not getting any other public comment, I'll entertain a motion to accept the HDR sewer rate study report.
I so move.
Moved by Director Cox.
I'll second.
Second by Smeltzer.
Okay, roll call. Vice President Trissom?
Yes.
Director Smeltzer?
Yes.
Director Wilson?
Yes.
Director Cox?
Yes.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you all.
Great. And so on the same agenda item, I think there's a second half, which is a consideration and action on setting the public hearing for the change in the sewer rates as indicated in both the report and in the draft 218 notice for the years 24 through 28. So I don't know whether staff had any thing. We've got a copy of the draft notice that will go out to all of our customers. I know that you think I certainly got copies of it. I don't know that it was CC'd to the other folks as you were working on drafts, but you've gotten some feedback. We've made some changes.
We did, except for the last changes that we made, which was a modification of the photos. And then based on some feedback from legal, we clarified that it was the fiscal years.
Okay.
So that consistency was there. Other than that, verbiage didn't change. It was just those final touches on appearance.
So this is going to go out to all of our customers within 15 days from now?
Yes, it's the drop dead date is, should I go back up there? So
Yeah, just so Dale can hear you better.
I'm really trying to project my voice more, but I'm not very good at it. Yeah, so once this is accepted and if you guys have any additional changes during this meeting, we make those changes. We'll send it to InfoSend. It takes them, was it 7 to 10 days?
I think it was
6 to 8 business days to print it up and get it ready to mail out. Celeste has already been working on the addresses to get to them. We're almost complete with that. As soon as this is ready, we'll send it to them probably today. Takes them 6 to 8 days, and then once it's ready to mail out, they'll fix the date on the top of the letter, and then they'll get that mailed out. We will be posting it to the website.
Yeah.
And what I do not know is if we're going to put it in the paper.
This requires a change in your ordinance 2-2015, right? And I think ordinances, I don't know, Andrew, this is probably your realm to make sure we're not missing any links in terms of public notification. Is a newspaper.
No, there's no newspaper notification for this public hearing or anything like that. Prop 218 specifically provides for the mailed notice, which the agency is doing, but that's the only required notice.
And it's being incorporated as part of a change in a new ordinance, right?
Yes. So
Okay.
the ordinance 2015 is the rules and regulations.
Right.
And that will be presented potentially. We have some other research to do the same time as the Prop 218. We are looking at trying to maybe divide that out so we can section things off to update accordingly, but we will need to be working with legal on that. And the other part of that ordinance is the connection fee changes, potential changes, because to mirror up the two tables for sure. And then I think one thing to note, if it's appropriate, if it's not, tell me, is that the protests have to be mailed in or delivered in person. They cannot be faxed or emailed.
And that's explicitly stated in the notice. There was a spot where that was stated, right?
It's right on
And
the top of the little cutout on the back.
How do I protest the proposed rates?
I'll have my glasses.
And that's good. You've given them an email so that it wouldn't encourage protest in that way. Thanks, Crystal. And Richard, I think it's looking really good. Anything else you guys wanted to bring to our attention on the notice?
I didn't have anything else. Did you have anything?
Okay.
Just the pictures and the years. We changed pictures in the years.
Okay.
I thought in the finance committee, correctly if I'm wrong, there were going to be captions under the pictures.
We did do that, but when we changed the pictures to scenery pictures, we took the captions out.
Okay. And I'm not sure what the snow, I might be being picky, but I don't quite get the picture of the
Can
snow.
you share it online?
Maybe because I'm tired of snow.
It's this is Director Smeltzer's house somewhere in there.
Can't see it.
You can see it better
Is that true?
electronically than you
Did you
can
see?
print it. And,
Okay.
we will. I'm just assuming that InfoSend's going to give us. InfoSend helped us put this together.
Yeah.
Their graphic designer helped us put this together, and I don't know if it prints out this way.
If you'd like, we can certainly change that.
I
See
mean, my personal, if there's a picture of all the employees together or something like that, this just seems like a filler to me. And I guess it's maybe because I've dealt with a lot of marketing things, but that doesn't tell me anything about the
The
agency.
picture. Do we have one?
I think
We have the pink
the
one.
latest one we have is when we did the cancer awareness.
We could put that in there.
We could put that one in there.
I'd be interested to see what the other board members think.
Yeah, the snow picture, I looked at that. In general, I like the scenery pictures more than the kind of hard to decipher. I know what they are, but I think the public would be challenged to understand why there's a pipe that's exposed and the other ones. So, the snow one's underwhelming. I bet you could find something else. Maybe, again, I kind of like the clean river and clean lakes imagery, so maybe you can put a Donner Lake image or something like that. That's really ultimate purpose of what we do is to keep these lakes and rivers clean. Would be great. Yeah, maybe I'm also tired of all this stuff. We're biased at this moment. Thanks, Scott. Dale, do you have any questions on the or comments on the new 218 notice?
Not at all.
Okay, David?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay, and I am also good with that one comment on the snow picture. If we can find something else to snap in there, that'd be great. I guess the one other comment I would say is, and kind of repeating myself, would be that you reach out and get copies of this early as you can to the member agencies, kind of finance and customer service staff, because it's going to be our member agencies that perhaps get confused and receive the calls on this, and we don't want them being confused and having a possibly negative reaction to someone calling Tahoe City or North Tahoe about a rate change and being told there is no rate change. They don't know what they're talking about, and so I would do some public outreach to our member agencies, and so they know what's going out, have a chance to read it, and have a potential script about telling folks who possibly call in regarding this, who to contact here, when the meeting is, and can sound knowledgeable and on this as well. So
Alpine's up to speed, but that's a good idea for everyone else.
Yeah, and NTPUD, when I presented yesterday, the 2 slides that Dale had requested, I would like to get those to them as well as this.
The updated version of the letter,
Yes, please.
the final version of the letter.
Great.
super. There's no other director comments and anything from the public. Not hearing that, and you've obviously routed this through legal counsel to make sure this meets the notification requirements required.
Yes.
And so I guess at this point I will open it up for a motion to direct staff to move forward with the setting of the public hearing in accordance with Prop 218.
I'll open.
Second.
Roll call. Vice President Tristan,
Yes.
Director Smeltzer,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
and Director Cox.
Yes.
Okay, great. Super. Like I said, really nice to be on a path towards financial stability, and be interesting to see, how engaged the public gets over the next 2 months. Thanks, Crystal. Thanks, Richard. All right, so done with item 2. We'll move on to item 3, approval of the 2023 roof repair project. Big one.
Yes. Good morning, directors. So before you today is a request for approval to solicit bids for the 2023 roof repair project. So this project builds, I don't think we have any slides on it. This roof repair project builds on the projects we did in 2018, 2019, and 2022. So these projects just in general repair roofs that have reached their end of their useful life and putting a new roof on those areas. For this project, the focus is on AWT, our Advanced Waste Treatment Building. That's the large building that direction from the parking lot. And there's 2 areas. One is the lower roof, which is over the pipe corridor, the pipe gallery, and then the bigger portion is the main roof, the primary building, the tall building you see out there. Construction work contemplated to be constructed between June 26th, 2023 and September 15th, 2023. The engineer's estimate for the project is $1.2 million. And because this was not originally allocated on the budget for this coming fiscal year, is we're requesting that the money is part of the $2.514 million that was allocated for fiscal year 26-27 be shifted forward to this next fiscal year to cover the cost. it was anticipated that part of that 2.5 million was to repair that roof. The problem was we saw that roof was deteriorating. We thought it had more life left than it actually ended up having. So we're just asking for those monies that were parked out in the future. Some of that 1.2 million of it, or whatever the bid is, to be shifted forward. So attached are the roof repair project contract drawings and the recommendation. Management and staff recommend approval to solicit bids for the 23 roof repair project.
So Jay, I'm trying to. You're wanting 1.2 million out of. You said the 2025.
26, 27.
26, 27.
There was a line item for a roof repair project.
Okay,
Yeah,
I'm
26.
looking at this other sheet and it's saying 1.552.
Okay,
So I'm not
that
sure.
was
I'm just trying to find out where that.
going off of the adopted budget from this last fiscal year. So it could be that as the amount changed fiscal. The 2.514 was from the adopted budget last July.
Which project am I looking at? Because I have it right here.
It'd be a roof repair project.
I got a quick question there, Jay. Is this how many times have we replaced these roofs? Is this the second time, third time? What are we looking at here?
This is the first time for this section.
Wow.
The first time in 50 years?
Yes.
Wow.
And we've done spot repairs, but in terms of, with our own staff yeah, so the first time, now granted, part of this roof was built in 1977-ish. Part of it was built in 1983-ish. So there's slightly different time frames. But in general, yeah, you've got 40 to 50 year life.
That's pretty good.
That's impressive.
So for fiscal 25, I have on the schedule that Sean just presented 1.2 million, 1.3 million, in total 12.5 million
So
over the length of time.
what I've been looking at was the adopted budget from last fiscal year, which was, I think it was probably 10 or 15 line items down on the adopted budget.
And it was 2.7, which I'm seeing that's the combined kind of 5-year amount in the budget capital improvement plan that Sean has associated with the rate study. And so it looks like really the 1.2 is just being moved up 1 year, and then there's still another 1.5 for fiscal year 27.
Right.
Are you guys actually seeing any active leaking coming through that
Yes. Yeah.
roof? Okay,
Yes.
so hence the timeliness of getting it repaired. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's a very large monolithic area. We don't want to see a catastrophic failure of the main roof during the winter. So, it's what we'd like to. We think it may last maybe 1 more year, 2 more years, but we know it won't last out to 26, 27.
And the 1.2 million is a significant increase over the size of the other roofing projects we've seen, which I think have been in the order of $200,000 or $400,000. Is that really just based on the square footage of the structure?
Yeah.
So it's not associated with any kind of the nature of the roof itself. It's
No.
just a much larger roof area.
Larger areas.
Okay.
And it is based on, we took a prediction on what the bidding climate is in terms of escalating costs. So it's not a huge margin difference, but it is, the unit cost is slightly elevated due to inflationary factors.
Okay. And again, it'll be a competitively bid.
Yes.
Where you're seeking permission to solicit bids in a competitive process, and so.
Correct. And we always have the ability, if bids come in, it doesn't mean you have to go, like, if bids are ridiculous, we decide that it can last one more year and we want to rebid, or something to that effect, we can. So this action is just permission to solicit bids. And then moving the budget to accommodate it.
Yeah, the second part of it, I think, is good for us to understand. I don't know that there's any kind of budgetary action, Richard. Are you seeking, in terms of changing the budget? I think we would just approve the project and understand that, that this was not budgeted in that we may see an overrun in this year, but, we're doing it, we're not going to see that cost in the subsequent years.
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess the number I keep coming back to is that we've got on the report that Sean HDR put together, 1.26 million in 2025, and then 1.552 in 2027. So what you're requesting is the 1.2 out of those two combined.
Yeah,
In essence.
those monies that were parked out there for that time period for the roof, part of it is this roof here. Yeah.
Okay.
So taking that 1.2 of those monies and moving it forward.
I'm fine with that. I think given what we've gone through this year, it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and I don't know that given the timeline to get the rate study going and the debt financing in place, this doesn't put us in a place where have exhausted our reserves. We have the reserves available to do this. We're just drawing them down a little bit lower than originally anticipated, but not to the point where we're obviously have exhausted those reserves.
Correct.
Okay. Dave, any questions on the project?
Nope.
Dale, anything from you?
Yeah, I just have one question for Jay and Richard. Is this the same company that did our roof repair a couple of years ago on the the front of our building?
We won't know yet until we get the bids. We know that the contractor that we've been engaging with on this project is interested in bidding. So we'll find out when we get bids and who it's awarded to. But yeah, they're engaged.
The reason I asked, Jay, is because I'm sure that the company that we had do our first repair did a great job, but they totally devastated the landscaping and our the appearance of the front of our building. And I hope that whoever we get to do these other two buildings, it's not somewhere where the devastation is so apparent for the public.
Yeah, we've taken that into account, and the staging areas for this work are on the other side of the building from the main entrance. So in areas where we will not have a visual impact.
Perfect, Jay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Jay, one last question. What would be the warranty on this roofing product? Manufacturer?
So we, I think it's a 1 year on the bonds, 2 years on products. I think or on the workmanship. I think the product has a 20-year, but I could have those
Sounds
incorrect. But I think that's what that is.
Sounds about right. And that was probably a similar situation 40 or 50 years ago, and so we've really maximized the use of the existing roof.
Yeah.
Great. Any other questions? Anything?
Good with it.
And I'll entertain a motion to direct staff to solicit bids for the 2023 roof repair project.
So moved.
Moved by Cox, seconded by Wilson. No public comments.
Roll call.
Yes.
Vice President Tracy,
Yes.
Director Smelser,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Cox.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Jay. And next item is approval to purchase two Taylor-Dunn electric utility products.
Good morning, Board of Directors. For you, you've got a continuation of the cart replacement project that we've kind of had going on for the last 5 years or so. So this is a continuation of that. There was a study done in 2018 kind of assessing the age of the electric vehicle fleet that we have, and many of them were 20 plus years old and being degraded pretty heavily. So with that aging fleet, it was determined to systematically replace a few per year until the fleet was renewed. We had kind of assessed staff's interpretations and performance of the existing Taylor-Dunn carts, and we decided to standardize on the Taylor-Dunn V200 cart, and we've been purchasing those the last several fiscal years. This year, 2023, Taylor-Dunn is phasing out the V200 and being replaced with a Bigfoot S that's essentially the same vehicle, but it has a little bit different ergonomics on the seats and the steering wheel, so it's a little bit more comfortable. And with that came a slight price increase as well. So we had originally budgeted $25,000 for the year. With the price increase within the model, we put the quote that we received from Toyota Material Handling to $27,000 with a total amount with sales tax being $29,289.76, and the quote was solicited through the National Joint Powers Alliance Sourcewell program. So we're asking for, or we're recommending that we purchase the two of these Bigfoot S utility carts for the amount up to $30,000, and the supplemental budget required to be able to complete that transaction will be absorbed in the maintenance department operating budget for fiscal year 23. Any questions for me?
David, questions?
No, I'm good.
No questions.
Dale, questions?
Are we surplusing out any of these older rigs, Richard, or are we just adding these to the fleet?
No, we are surplusing out the older ones.
How many of them are we going to surplus out?
2.
So these are replacement Taylor-Dunn for what we're going to surplus out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
And thank you, Tanner. Is there, this was, you mentioned part of a long-term plan. I know that we have made some purchases in prior years. Is this complete the transition, or do we have plans to continue to replace existing?
Yeah, we have some more to go, so we'll continue to keep this plan going forward to a year.
Okay.
It's been working out pretty well for phasing them out. Seems like as we get there, the ones that are kind of hitting the end of their life are dying just in time for us to buy 2 more.
And what is the total size of the fleet of these types of carts in the agency?
16, I believe.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, between the maintenance department and operations and
Okay.
the warehouse and
What kind of return can you expect when you sell the old ones?
Do you remember what we got when we sold the other 2? Not very much.
it was a few $100s per.
Wow.
Yeah.
They're 20 years old or close to it, you
The
said?
ones we surplused last year were probably close to 30 years old.
Wow.
And they had very little return. The ones that we'd be surplusing this year are a little newer, but still not in great shape. So I would expect the return to be low.
Okay.
We've got plenty of use in the back of that.
So my final comment is I don't disagree with the plan to replace them. I think we need to do that is connected to the State Air Resources Board's Clean Fleet Initiative, which is going to be requiring public agencies like ours to make purchases of electric vehicles. I don't know the exact details, but they're going to require that in the very soon future, a certain number of the fleet that we buy have to be zero emission vehicles. And I don't know whether these types of vehicles, I don't know whether they're street legal, whether they would fall into the requirements of that, but if the agency has other fleet needs, there's an opportunity to use these as, the ability, and it's on a vehicle basis, not dollars basis. I think 50% of your fleet has to be electric, and so you could buy a brand new, $750,000 non-electric Vector, which there are no electric ones available. But if you had a clean fleet or one of these small $20,000 units, you continue to comply, and so you should take a look at that, and not expend all these electric vehicles if they would count beforehand, or else, because they might help the agency stay in compliance going forward. But it sounds like, I know we haven't replaced 16 of them over the last couple of years, so it sounds like you have more on the way, and so just something to be aware of, the timing of the purchase. I think that our direction would be to move forward with the purchase, but take a look at the timing and when you're going to need to comply with that, and there might be some advantage potentially in letting it roll over to a fiscal year or something like that to do that. So with that said, I'll entertain a motion to direct staff to approve staff's purchase of 2 Taylor-Dunn Bigfoot S electric vehicles for not to exceed amount of $30,000.
Second.
By Smelzer, second by Wilson.
Roll call.
Yep.
Vice President Trason,
Yes.
Director Smeltzer,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Cox.
Yes.
Motion approved. Thank you, Tanner. And next we have requesting purchase of a CPEX progressive cavity pump for the TWAS.
All right, I'm at this one again. So this agenda item is to replace one of the existing pumps that's being used for pumping TWAS, thickened voice activated sludge, from the thickeners to the centrifuge feed tank in the watering building. There are currently 2 pumps in place. One has failed and requires either an expensive rebuild or now a retrofit or replacement to more modern styles. These ones are particularly quite old and have a lot larger footprint and older technology than what's currently available. The modern design that's available for this style of pump allows for kind of rebuild in place so that you can disassemble it, replace the wear components, and reassemble it without having to lift the entire pump out of the area and creating additional risk for staff being able to handle those large, heavy, cumbersome items. So it dramatically simplifies the amount of effort that goes into replacing and maintaining these pumps, and also increases the safety factor and brings us up to a modern technology for how those pumps function. CPEX has a patent on the smart conveying technology where the rotor and stator come in multiple pieces, and so it can be quickly maintained. Nobody else in the industry has been able to come up with something that is comparable. So sometimes it takes a project from 8 hours down to less than an hour. So the amount of time that staff spend on these pumps is not free. So I want to factor that into the life cycle cost. The replacement parts for the existing style were rivaling the replacement cost with an upgrade. So we're recommending upgrading to the CPEX progressive cavity pump for TWAS up to the amount of $20,000. We got a quote of $70,488 from Municipal Water. They're the sole source provider for CPEX pumps for our region. There was some estimated freight at $1,000. We're asking for $10,000 to cover that. Any questions?
I think earlier on you said that we're currently using 2 pumps.
Correct.
So this would be in conjunction with the older pump.
Correct. Yeah. They can perform the same function, but they are independent.
Okay.
So the other pump is perfectly functional and can be repaired for minor things. If it has another significant failure, it may make sense to upgrade that one as well. But right now, Bolton U can operate side by side without any impact.
And to make sure I'm hearing right, the CPEX pump is more of a modular, the components can be replaced at roughly a quarter of the amount of time or whatever than the others.
Yeah, dramatically.
So there's a dramatic labor saving.
Correct.
Okay.
And what's the condition of that second pump? Is it getting ready to go, or?
It's been operating well. Michael may be able to speak a little bit closer to that, but I have not heard any issues with it at present. But they do get rebuilt periodically as they age.
And the two existing pumps are of the same age and style. So the fact that one has had a large failure, means that the other one could be right behind it. But we typically have a redundant system there, so we don't run the two pumps at the same time. It's usually one pump at a time, but we have it for redundancy. So if we can turn the older pump over into a redundant pump, we could probably get some life cycle out of it and then use this newer pump. And then we still have our backup. And then later on down the road, we can replace the
That's
others
what I
as
was-
needed.
That was my question, to get them both the same, so we had all the same parts and pieces to work with. Okay.
Tanner and Richard, you guys are looking to sole source this based on our policy that says, if it's compatible with an existing one. But you're saying that the other one is not a CPAX. Do we have a CPAX in a different place in the plant other than the TWAS pumping?
We do. We've been putting those into the primary sludge pumping station,
Okay.
and they've been pretty productive in that region.
Okay.
So we're starting to transition toward that style of pump to facilitate maintenance and reduce the life cycle cost for that.
Okay. You have replacement parts that can be used across
Correct.
various areas. Very good. Any other questions? Thank you. Dale, anything else from you?
No questions, no comments.
All
Thank
right.
you, Blake.
Public comment? None?
If I could have a comment.
Sure.
I just wanted to point out, the TWAS pumps are identified as part of the upgrades in the master plan. They're actually on the list that was part of the presentation HDR did for a total of $143,000. Just want to highlight that we're going to be able to do this in-house without contracting it out. While the $17,000 doesn't include a new VFD, I think that was $6,000-ish for a new VFD because we're taking these from DC drive to an AC. The agency has saved a substantial amount of money with the ability of staff to do this internally.
Do we have to revisit our rate study?
I don't think so.
Good job. That's the kind of stuff that we want to hear and will pay off in the long run. So that's great. Thanks, Richard. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to direct staff to purchase the CPAX pump.
I so moved.
I'll second.
Great.
Roll call. Vice President Tristan,
Yes.
Director Smeltzer,
Yes.
Director Wilson,
Yes.
Director Cox.
Yes.
Thank you, Tanner.
Thanks, Dan.
All right. That brings us to the management team reports. Mike, we're going to start with you.
Yes, sir. Morning again, Board of Directors, Vice President Tristan. So for the operations report for the month of February, all the plant waste discharge requirements were met for the month. Plant performed well. We're continuing with the sodium hypochlorite pilot project for effluent disinfection, and it's performing well. And we are still continuing to compile data. Water Information Management Solutions, the WIMS system is currently being utilized by staff, and internal configuration setup is ongoing. So we've actually got to the place where we're starting to put data into it and build the program, and staff are using it for logging and daily data addition. So that's moving forward. For the laboratory, staff one other thing for the operations department was we did report a small effluent leak, final effluent leak to Lawton. It came off of one of the filters on a vent line that froze. Had a heat trace that failed, and the line busted open. It was estimated to be about 150 gallons, and we treated that with some dilute 10% solution of bleach. So, and we have reported that to Lawton. And then for the lab, the staff performed the necessary laboratory testing. Lab staff are in the process of implementing their quality system improvements, and staff assisted with the WIMS to LIMS interface. Since the two programs actually work together, the lab data will be able to, at some point, once the interface is done, to automatically populate into the WIMS system for reporting for Lawton. And the other big story for the month was snow. We do have next slide, please. We do have a few. Next slide. We have a few photos just from last month that we weren't able to share. So this was the chlorine leaving the plant for the final time, and then what the building actually looks like with all the tonners gone. It's a beautiful sight. Next slide, please. This is just some of the sodium hypochlorite. This is a delivery to the temporary tanks, and then the injection point, we're actually injecting the sodium hypochlorite into the final effluent line. Thank you, maintenance, for setting that all up. And then this was our digester 29 cleaning project. See, staff are giving a thumbs up for the final there, getting it all cleaned up and put back into service. They did a great job. They worked hard. There was a few unanticipated hiccups with the pumping system, but the guys got in there and worked really hard and got it done. They did a great job. So I just wanted to congratulate them and thank them for the hard work they did.
Michael, I've got a question on that.
Yes.
Is there a periodical, or is there a defined time frame when these get cleaned, or is there other?
Yes. So for our primary digesters, which are 3 of them, digesters 29, 30, and 33, they're cleaned between every 5 to 7 years. And then the secondary holding tank, which is digester 31, is cleaned about every 10 years.
Okay.
So I had a question about I don't understand the dewatering and the rental of tanks to do that.
The dewatering and rental of tanks.
For the digesters, I was looking into.
So what we do is the grit and rag material that collect inside the digester, we have to remove it. And we actually use these bins. They're dewatering bins. They have cloths in them. We pump the material from inside the digester into those bins. We dewater it, and then we take that material and we actually send it to the landfill.
Okay,
So those bins are used to dewater the solution that we pull out of the water and the debris that we pull out of the digester.
Okay, so that's what the tank rental that I was looking at.
And we are actually right now talking about maybe purchasing a couple of
That's what I was
those
thinking. I
tanks
was wondering.
and having them on site, and then we can use them for other purposes too. When we're getting the beads out of B&R backwash tank, we can put the cloths in there and we can pump the beads in there, dewater it. So we're looking at maybe purchasing a couple of those coming up because they're not that expensive. The tanks are about $10,000, 10 to 12,000, I think, is what we saw.
Similar to the ones that the sodium hypochlorite is in, kind of a Baker tank.
It's a little bit different. It's an open transfer vessel that you can pull up onto a roll off and move it around and stuff like that. And they've got a screen material inside, metal screen, and then you put a cloth screen on top of that, and you can use whatever micron mesh size you want to allow the water to pass, but the particulates that you want to keep in there stay in. So we are looking at maybe purchasing some, and then we'll just have them on site because it does get quite costly. It's the mob and demob that cost the most on those. It's a few $1,000s each time you bring them up and take them out. The daily rental is relatively cheap, but it does add up over time. So.
How often do you have to dewater and remove the accumulated solids?
It just depends on how much per day we get out of the digester, but on average, we can fill up 1 to 2 bins per day if we're processing well.
No, but I mean, there's on a very less frequent schedule, you actually draw the entire digester down, like in that picture.
Yeah, every 5
and
to
clean
7
the stuff
years.
out. 5 to 7 years. Okay, thanks.
And we've got them kind of staggered a little bit, so we'd be using those bins almost every year. We'd be using the bins that we purchase.
Mike, can you talk to us about the impacts operationally, given the winter we're having, above and beyond snow removal, just to the plant itself, and anticipated. Last night we had high flows. We're going to have a huge spring runoff. How does that impact operations? Any concerns?
So as you can see here, for the month of February, there was not a lot of large impacts. Our maximum flow was 7.4 MGD, and that was over the holiday period. We are seeing increased flows right now from the INI, from the rain on snow events that we've had. It's been a little bit warmer here in the month of March. So as of last night, we saw about 8.5 million gallons was the max flow for the day yesterday, and we'll probably process about 6.5 million for the day. So the flows are up overall just because of the rain on snow, the warmer weather. If it reverts back to colder temperatures, we could see those flows drop off. Again, once it does warm up with all the snow on the ground, we are going to see an increase. We could compare this to 2011, 2017. Those springs, we had about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, where we had an increased amount of flow, but the overall loading to the plant pretty much stays the same. So we're just processing more flow. That typically takes more power to push it through the plant. You got more pumps in service, a little bit more chemical typically, even though the concentrations and loadings aren't higher. You do end up using a little bit more chemical to treat the same amount of water, even though it's diluted just because of the higher flows. So there will be, we do usually see an increase in overall costs during these springs where we have a lot of extra flow.
Thanks. And I don't know that I'm stealing Tanner's thunder, but I know that crossing the bridge there, I've seen you guys have cleared the road around the ponds, and not only keeping this site clear, but the fact that you're maintaining access to the ponds it's impressive. There's been a lot of snow removal, so good job on that.
And we
being ready in case something comes up.
And it's exactly it. We have to be able to get to those structures out there so that we can bypass flow if we have to our ponds, which we have not had to do at this point, and then also to put in our parallel line to handle the higher flows. Anything in excess of 9 MGD, we put in the parallel line, so we're running the 2 lines coming to the plant, so that we're not backing flow up above the structure there out of Pond A. So, and they did a great job. It was a lot of work. Hats off to the maintenance crew for all the snow removal they did do. I am stealing the thing now. They did a great job. They also helped rescue us from, we still have to maintain our well sampling and river sampling. We got our vehicles stuck out in the snow, and it handled everything pretty good, but there was one day with a lot of fresh powder that we ended up getting stuck, and the maintenance crew went out and helped staff out and got the vehicle out.
What kind of vehicle do you take over the snow like that?
It's the Polaris with this tracks on it.
Okay, great.
So it's the first time we've actually gotten it stuck, but it was a big snowstorm. So.
Yeah. Yep.
But we can't. We still have to get all our samples, and we still have to get out and to lab staff also who are going out and braving the weather and going through that snow. And hats off to them too for making sure we're meeting our requirements of sampling.
Great. Anything else, Mike?
That's it.
Anything from the directors?
Thank you.
On to the next staff report.
Good morning again, directors. For the month of February, February, the maintenance department continued to supplement a couple of projects and assist with firewall configuration, the website that had been rolled out the previous month, ongoing changes of those things, continuing to work through state IT master plan implementation. Loosely, LIMS and WIMS are all kind of living, breathing programs that have been developed over the course of years. So we'll continue to support that. The chlorine scrubber project's been ramping up, and then obviously the sodium hypochlorite project that Michael talked about. We spent a lot of time supporting that project, making sure that's successful. As far as activities, specific activities with the month, we had multiple issues with the boiler condensate system that were repaired. Their IT department rolled out a mobile device management MDM solution and deployed tablets to staff for maintenance staff to use with the CMMS system, and that's been very successful so far. So appreciate the effort that they put into that. We also continued work in the maintenance building. Retrofitted the wet room in the maintenance area and painted it and installed some baseboard and installed lockers and items, racks for that. So that was a nice upgrade to a facility that hadn't been touched in quite some time. We also did a modification to the final effluent instrumentation line. So there's a sample line for all of our instrumentation that was modified to make that process sampling a little bit more effective and accurate. The sodium hypochlorite project, the staff worked on automation of it, creating different ability to control it from the SCADA system, adding tank level sensors, and just giving more visibility for operators to control that process and keep everything within compliance. We had a couple of pump rebuilds, primary scum pump and 2 water pumps that were rebuilt and reinstalled. As Michael noted, there was some heat trace issues. There was a picture in there that showed one of the very large ice waterfalls that had overcome one of the heat trace systems on the land that ended up failing. And so there was some ice waterfall chipping that was required to repair that line. We also performed annual maintenance and load bank testing on the facility's standby generators to make sure those are ready for emergencies. And then, as you'll see, all the pool vehicles, the fleet vehicles were retrofitted with agency logos. So you'll see some precision alignment in the pictures of the 2 water pumps. There's a very in-depth process to make sure that those things are coupled properly and that they will last and not have any vibration issues. And now there are logos on all the vehicles now, so they're all easily identifiable. Work orders wise, mechanical completed 35, have 112 remaining. Fleet's got 4 completed, 63 remaining. E&I 17 and 30 remaining. And IT got 33 and 32. So it's a pretty standard month for us. And then snow removal was a very common theme. So a lot of time and effort, and that definitely continued in this month as well. So, any questions for me?
Any questions from the board members?
No.
Dale?
No questions?
Okay.
Yes.
None for me. Thank you, Tanner.
Good morning again. So engineering report for the department. Under construction now is a chlorine scrubber improvement project. If you on your way out today, you may see the crane still there, or maybe we saw it on the way in. We're removing the temporary scrubber, and contractors doing some work to prepare for the installation of the new scrubber, which is now live. The 2022 control room upgrade projects, closeout activities, 2022 roof repair closeout activities, 2023 roof repair project we just discussed last couple agenda items ago. digestion improvements project. So we're developing a scope of work with the help of some consultants, with the goal of sending that out to RFP. So we're in the process now of engaging a few key consultants to help us with that effort. 2022 filter effluent condition assessment project, that one has been on there for a while. We're still awaiting equipment to arrive for that, so kind of a holding pattern on that one. The sodium hypochlorite disinfection full-scale project, so what we're looking at is what would it take to for a pilot system to make that a little more sustainable, so that we have time to study our alternatives and keep us on hypo through that time period. So we're doing that in-house as a study. And then similar to the digestion project, the TRI Alpine Meadows to Olympic Valley rehab project, we're also developing a scope of works with a few consultants with the aim to have that go out to RFP. Any questions on any of those or anything else?
Yeah, Jay, I got a question.
Sure.
When you talk about the rehab project for the TRI between Alpine and Squaw, is this a result of photographing of the TRI, and is there any signs of deterioration of the line between Squaw and Alpine?
Yeah, so this was tackled as a topic as part of the master plan development, and what was identified is that our river crossings are our biggest liability, if you will, for the TRI. The TRI is showing signs of corrosion in each of those river crossings. The feeling amongst our consultants that have looked at it is that, yeah, you should put this on the schedule to rehab. So that's why you've seen it in the master plan. There's a few TRI projects having to do with river crossings, and it's on account of that if your pipeline fails under the river, it's a really difficult situation to be in, and we want to be proactive and have those lined or have them replaced or whatever the solution ends up being as part of the study.
Yeah, what is the material that's used in those crossings, Jay?
Yeah, it's ductile iron pipe. Most of our TRI is RCP, reinforced concrete pipe, but the river crossings are ductile iron pipe segments.
Now, are those ductile iron pipes full-sized as the rest of the TRI, or is there a tilt down?
The diameter is the same by and large. I mean, the TRI varies in size between 24 and I think our largest is 42 inches in size. But if you're thinking about like one particular river crossing or any of them, actually, when you look at the upstream diameter and the downstream diameter, substantially the river crossing is the same diameter as what's upstream and downstream. So the nominal diameter is the same. None of them are inverted siphons, which is to the TTSA's benefit, meaning the downstream is always lower than the upstream part. So sometimes when you have a river crossing, both your upstream and your downstream end of it will be higher than the lowest point of the river crossing. But in our case, it's a consistent slope downwards as you progress through the river crossing.
Now, when you talk about the consultant and the scope of work for development, what's the anticipated ETA for this project?
So we're getting a few different consultants involved. They all have slightly different scopes of work. We're going to be compiling one scope of work and then putting that out to RFP. So I would, and with some consultants, we're having difficulty getting traction on and getting scopes of work from them. So We're hoping that within a few months we'll be in a position to put an RFP out in the street.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So the time frame for the actual work is 2023, 24?
So I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, I think the adopted CIP has that we were going to expend our first monies this current fiscal year on basically the study.
Okay.
But because we're having trouble getting traction on some consultants, that we may start extending the money next fiscal year instead of this fiscal year. And then you have a window where you're spending money on design study first, and you have a window where you're spending money on design and then spending money on construction. So it was a multi-year expenditure.
Okay. And I'm just looking at what Sean had put together, and one of the bigger ones was the PRI renewal program, and it looks like it really starts to kick in 2028 through 2032. So this is a ongoing situation.
So that line item on the master plan, that's addressing, we have certain areas of the TRI that we have exposed rebar showing, and we're fairly certain that that's a construction defect. It's not, the corrosion of the pipe wall looks decent, lack of corrosion is, but we need a plan to go forward in terms of when these areas are closer to failing.
Okay.
These spot repairs, what's the best way to handle each one of those spot repairs? So there's a couple things. One is a visible reinforcement study, which will study each of these areas and provide plans on how we might address one pipe segment as opposed to another, because each one may beg a different solution. And then those monies that you're seeing, in the master plan and Sean's work, is that's those monies out in the future are for treating these spot areas.
Okay.
Whereas these river crossings were identified as their own projects.
Okay. Thank you.
And they're listed just above.
Okay. Thank you.
And the study basically is going to be how to fix or the river crossings or upgrade or whatever.
Yeah, deal with the bypasses while it's being fixed to get water across the river.
Correct. Yeah. So
while you're repairing them.
Yeah. So the study is basically enables us to have enough project definition that the designer can then give us a more dialed in scope of work for the design, right? What's the best approach to fix this river crossing? Is it slip lining? Is it micro tunneling, or is it direct, open trench replacement? And each one of them, while we think we may know which one it's going to go to, each approach has a very different design cost for it, right? So you really want to enter the job, the design job, knowing which approach you're going to go with, and that's what the study's for.
Got it.
And it's not a capacity-related issue. It's just part of our repair, just
Condition.
age.
Yeah.
Is this the manhole 33 and 35?
Yes, and so why we're changing the title on that is that part of this study is defining exactly what our start and end point is. One of our lessons learned on a prior project, 2 projects ago, was don't make an assumption as to where you think you're going to start and end, because it actually may be more. And so part of the study is, okay, we know it's between Alpine and Olympic, and we think we know where the start and end is, manhole 33 to 35.
Right.
But we want the consultant to be able to validate that and say, oh no, we actually need to start up at 32, or we need to end now at 36.
And we did attribute some of that to capacity, 11%.
Yeah, the primary driver is the condition. It's not like we have a bottleneck there. However, there's remaining life in the pipeline,
Right.
and that's why we attribute that portion to.
Gotcha. You're not increasing capacity, but there's unused capacity that we can, by repairing it, we can apply to Fund 2.
Fund 2, correct.
Okay, gotcha. Jay, the filter influent condition assessment, what is the influent filter? I know we have bar screens and grit removal, but what's the influent filter?
So if we were to do it over again, we'd probably insert the word pipeline in there in the project name, but it's the filter influent pipeline. So it's the pipeline that goes from that end of the plant up to this end of the plant.
Okay.
And it's a pressure pipe. We've never drained it before to review its condition, and we thought that would be a good thing to do.
Okay, so it's the influent to the filter, which is towards the end of the treatment process,
Correct.
not the raw sewage
Correct.
filtering. Okay, thank you. Any other questions for Jay? Jay, anything else? Thank you.
I just have a comment, and the question about the TRI really struck home to me the hard work, the thought process, and the way that we're approaching these. I think it's extremely professional and well done, and I really appreciate the answers. It's very educational. It makes me feel pretty comfortable.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Super. Crystal, you next?
Last.
Crystal, can you turn the mic up a little bit?
I will do my best. So we are doing some efficiency gains in the finance and accounting and admin department, and one of those is we set up positive pay. That's a really good internal control, and that has been completed in a process. And basically, what that does is compares any checks that come to the bank to a list that we send them, and if there's something that doesn't match, they reject it. And then we have to go and clear that or also reject it. So that was kudos to Dawn and Michelle for getting that taken care of. Then the other thing is that we filed our annual continuing disclosure statement that we're required to file because of our bond. We didn't have any issues there. On the billing and customer service side, the biggest thing that we have going on there is the rate study, and I just wanted to take the time to really give a shout out to Celeste, because her knowledge and her history with the agency, I've learned quite a bit from her, and she's put a lot of work into this on top of doing her regular responsibilities, and she needs to be recognized for that. And I also want to thank the finance committee, the department managers, and Sean. It's been a huge team effort and a very huge process. So thank you. Next slide. In the purchasing department, Kaylee's she's worked on top of her regular responsibilities and supporting Rochelle. Currently, we got the first responder jackets, coveralls, and we had to change up some uniforms, I believe, for maintenance. For the electrical engineering, we needed to get them some cotton uniforms. And then just in general, sewer rate study, wrapping up audit. We should be presenting the audit in April to the board. And then working on investments. Any questions?
No, thank you for all your hard work and your staffs.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that wraps up the department reports. Go on to the general manager.
Obviously, the big focus has been working with HDR and Crystal staff to do the rate study. As mentioned, we continue to implement some new software programs when it comes to the WIMS and LIMS softwares. Jay and his group continue to make progress on CIP projects. We finalized the supervisor manager leadership training outline with the consultant, and are moving the proposal forward, and we're going to start scheduling dates on that. Continue with the one-on-ones with agency staff. As highlighted, sodium hypochlorite was also another big one that we continue to have frequent discussions about and tracking its performance. I participated in the Good Morning Truckee and gave a presentation there. completed all of the member district board meeting meet and greets. And then we had our local GM managers meeting that I attended as well. Any questions for me?
Questions?
No questions,
Okay.
comment?
So,
Thank you,
Richard.
going along well.
We'll move to item 7, which is Board of Director comments. So, Dale, we'll start with you. Any comments?
Well, I got a few comments. The first one is I'm just hoping that Rochelle has a speedy recovery with her ankle injury. I just miss seeing her, although I, communicate with her frequently. I want to thank also you, Blake, for running a good meeting today and recognizing me. I didn't feel like an abandoned orphan out here. I appreciate that. And just one quick comment or question for Mike. Mike, if I heard you correctly, we did not do any effluent diversion into our herb.
We have not.
Good job, very good. The final comment, I just want to thank Luke for helping me get my headphones set up and compatible with my tablet. It was good meeting with both Luke and Jay and Richard last week, and I can't tell you how much I appreciate the help you've given me getting me these headphones. It makes the meeting much more acceptable on my part. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dale. Director Wilson, comments?
I just would reiterate, thank you very much, staff. A lot of work's been going on in this, and I think the fruition is starting to pay off.
Dave?
I'm good.
Good. And yeah, we've said it before, but, on top of, meeting our mission of clean water, it's been a rough winter. I know that everybody just, not only are you having to maintain the plant with all the snow, but you got to deal with it at home and getting to work, and it's getting old. It's getting tiring. I think it taxes us physically and mentally. And so I just want you guys to know I appreciate you hanging in there and upholding the mission of the district and let your staff know that we appreciate it as well. It's been tough and we're not quite out of it yet, unfortunately, although it's nice to see some sun shining through the blinds right now. So a couple of days of sunshine will help out. But good job. Appreciate it. All right, I think that brings the open session of the meeting to an end. And so at this point, we will adjourn the closed session. We want to take a few seconds break. We'll meet back here in 5 minutes. Great.